with Alice Dee again. And do you want to introduce yourself, Alice Dee?
Oh, sure, vegaani. I'd be happy to. Basically, I'm a vegan, science-based author, educator, and culinary innovator, and my work bridges nutrition, ecology, and regenerative living. Many folks might know me from my pioneering contributions to raw plant-based cuisine and my influential books on evolutionary nutrition and vegan ethics. But today we're going to explore a different side of my expertise, specifically ecological veganic food production action, um, also known as food forests. I'm the author of a book entitled The Food Forest Guide, How to Cultivate an Edible Landscape for Good Health and Harvests. And this is a comprehensive manual in which I aim to teach readers how to design thriving, self-sustaining food ecosystems right in their own backyards. My work blends veganic permaculture principles, plant biology, soil science, and practical gardening wisdom to help people grow nutrient-dense plants, foods while regenerating the planet. So today I think the plan is to talk about what a food forest really is, why it matters, and how anyone, even beginners, can start cultivating their food at home.
Okay. So like you probably, I have also done for some years gardening, and I might also going to talk about some stuff, but we are mostly interviewing Alice today. So what was the first thing that inspired you to write your book about food forests?
Well, the inspiration came from, first of all, visiting a food forest by a well-known vegan author and activist by the name of Dr. Will Tuttle. It was such an inspiration to see him growing his own food. He and his wife, Madeline, have a beautiful food forest at their home. And also, I had been watching people feeling increasingly disconnected from their food, their health, and the natural world. In my view, and in Dr. Tuttle's, food forests offer a way back to growing nutrient-dense food while healing ecosystems rather than depleting them. And we live at a time when soil degradation, climate instability, and chronic disease are rising. So food forests provide a regenerative, plant-centered solution that nourishes both people and the planet. Basically, I wrote the book to give people a practical roadmap to reclaim their food sovereignty and ecological resistance while subsisting inexpensively on a raw plant-based diet.
Okay. For the listeners how may be new to the concepts, how do you uh, ex- how what exactly is your uh, idea for food forest, and how does it different from traditional gardening?
Well, a food forest is a perennial layered ecosystem that's designed to mimic a natural forest, but every layer is edible or medicinal. So instead of planting flowers, we're planting food plants, food trees, and uh, uh, you know, herbs. So
Yeah.
basically, herbs that you can heal yourself with. And instead of rows of annual crops, you have fruit trees, berry shrubs, vines, herbs, ground covers, root crops, and fungi, all working together. Traditional gardens often require constant input and maintenance, whereas food forests, once they get established, become self-sustaining systems that regenerate soil, conserve water, and produce food year after year with minimum intervention.
Okay. So I have here something about permaculture. Um, uh, is veganic gardening similar to aspects of permaculture?
Um, well, I like to approach food forests from both a scientific and an ecological perspective. So the core principles of permaculture are definitely involved in guiding the approach. So three basic principles guide the food forest. First of all, we mimic nature because natural ecosystems are the most efficient systems on Earth. Nature has been doing this for billions of years. Why not? Why don't we mimic the um, force, the natural force that has existed on this planet for so long. Secondly, I emphasize perennials because perennials build soil, stabilize ecosystems, and produce food reliably. Um, Third, I like to honor plant relationships. Plants do not grow in isolation, they grow in communities, just like we live in towns and so on. They also live in communities. And these principles generally align with vegan ethics because they emphasize regeneration, cooperation, and respect for natural living systems. And did you ask me about veganic?
Yeah, veganic agriculture.
Okay,
Are
okay,
there aspects that are in both kind of systems?
okay. Well,
That's a
veganic.
bit. Sorry, you disappeared.
Um, oh, am I back?
Yeah,
Can you hear me now?
yeah.
Okay, great. Well, veganic agriculture is an interesting subset of agriculture, and it's what I really focus on in the Food Forest Guidebook. It's a method of growing food that avoids all animal-derived inputs. So there's no manure, no blood meal, no bone meal, no fish emulsion, and no animal byproducts of any kind. Instead, the fertility comes from plant-based sources like compost, mulch, green manures, nitrogen-fixing plants, living ecosystems, and from our own bodies. So these sorts of nutrient inputs are completely ethical. So veganic growing uh, aligns with the vegan ethic because it produces food without exploiting animals, and it also aligns with ecological science, which is since animal-based fertilizers often introduce pathogens, heavy metals, nutrient imbalances, and uh, uh, things like antibiotics and so on, while plant-based systems build soil health naturally. Food forests are inherently veganic because they rely on perennial plants, mulch, and soil biology to create their fertility. They show that we can grow abundant, nutrient-dense food without harming animals or the planet.
Um, what does the term um? mm, your book talks about the 7 layers of um food forests. Can you talk to us about those layers and why they matter?
Yes, now this is a really important part of the food forest structure. The seven layers are basically canopy, which are tall trees, maybe oaks or eucalyptus or some other type of large trees, as well as larger fruit and nut trees like walnut trees, so on. And then subcanopy is the second layer. These are dwarf trees that grow underneath the canopy trees and get shade from the canopy trees. And then there's the shrub layer, which are usually berries of various types, blackberries, blueberries, goji berries, etc. Then there's the herbaceous layer. Now, this is culinary and medicinal herbs. Basically, greens in many situations. Then there's ground cover, which provides living mulch. A root layer, which are edible tubers and roots, like potatoes, sweet potatoes, beets, etc. And then there's a vertical layer. Now, this is the interesting one. These are our vines. So grapevines are probably the best known of the vines, but various other vines can be integrated into your food forest in the vertical layer. So layers 1 through 6 go from the highest to the lowest, but layer 7 can start in the ground and go all the way up to the top of the canopy. So that's an interesting thing about the vertical layer. So basically, these 7 layers maximize space, biodiversity, and nutrient cycling, they create a stable system like a forest where every niche is filled, reducing pests and increasing productivity of your garden.
It's a nice explanation indeed. I'm in my garden also trying to implant multiple layers. Next,
Oh, great. Great. Yeah,
yeah,
they do.
I start. I have one on the one side of my garden. I have a kind of mushroom layer. I mean, I'm going to have mushrooms between my fruit trees this year. Have there a kind of bark or so, tree bark, and then I put between those. I put in between the trees. I have one fig tree, an apple tree, and then I have a pear tree, then some cherries and some persimmons. And then on the side way of those trees, I have berry, put a bit lower berry bushes. Was a kind of
Perfect. Well, it sounds like you're well on your way to getting a food forest sustained, and you have some. It sounds like you have some beautiful trees there.
yeah.
I love fig trees. I think they're absolutely wonderful. Figs are one of the original, based on my research for the Pliocene diet. They're one of the original human foods. That is such an excellent food. Uh, figs are great. And then I'm also personally fond of another tree that you mentioned, which is a persimmon tree, because persimmons are wonderful fruits, and they are particularly useful because they come off the trees late in the season, and they can last for quite a long period of time. So, if you're looking to have a food forest feed you all year round, and you live in a climate where it gets pretty cold in the winter, and the trees are no longer producing, then it's good to have something like a persimmon, so that your food isn't all coming at the same time. So you do want to plan that also to have a range of food production over the season.
Mhm. I'm going to. That's why I was having different kind of trees also. Um, I was also thinking about having two types of figs. So, my figs that I have right now are a bit later variants. Um, they can, in warmer climates, give two types of figs, but in my climate, they only get one time, one harvest.
I see.
But that is enough. I got this year more of 5 kilograms of figs.
Wow, that's wonderful.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
yeah, that was really nice. Um, how does anyone choose the right plants for their climate, soil, and available space?
Okay. So the key is to start with climate appropriate perennials. I want to stress the importance of perennials here. And these are plants that evolve to thrive where you live. So it's very important to say not necessarily take a plant from China and try to make it grow in Europe, but instead to figure out what is naturally comfortable growing in your local climate. Then you need to assess your soil. Pick it up, hold it between your hands, and determine whether it's clay, sandy, or loamy. Different plants and different trees work better in different soils. Um, Next, you choose plants that naturally seed in those conditions. So if you have clay soil, you might need to amend it and put some other type of soil in with it to make it more hospitable to your plants. And then finally, consider the space that you have. You know, most of us these days are not blessed with massive amounts of land to be able to grow on, and even historical communities like the Essenes, for example, they had just small backyards, small house, and then a cistern that took water from the roof and saved water for them so that they could then water the trees in their yard. And that's so even a small yard can support dwarf trees, berry shrubs, herbs, and vines. Um, Back in biblical times, there were two required plants that you would plant in your yard, and one was a fig tree, and the other was a grapevine. So that's a great place to start. If you just put a fig tree and a grapevine, you're already on your way to working toward a food forest. The key is to choose plants that complement each other and fill different ecological roles based on the 7 layers that I previously described.
Mm-hmm. Um, look here. Um, many people feel um, intimidated by design. What is the simplest way to uh, begin to start planting your layout?
Okay, well, the simplest way certainly is to begin with one fruit tree. And then build something called a guild around it. A guild is a circle of supporting plants like nitrogen fixers, pollinator attractors, ground covers, and herbs. All of these different elements help make the fruit tree successful. So you want something to fix nitrogen in the soil so the fruit tree can use it. You want something to attract pollinators so that bees and so on will come and pollinate the fruit tree. You also want ground covers to prevent water from evaporating too quickly, and then herbs that can be consumed and used medicinally. So basically, you have one tree and one guild to go, created around it. That's the simplest and most powerful starting point. Over time, you can expand outwards and connect various guilds into a full food forest. So, each tree becomes like a guild, like a group.
Yeah,
We have guilds in gaming, groups
yeah.
as well,
There are
but
also
in this case,
the guilds are basically similar to kind of companion plants. What some people sometimes call it.
yes, that could be. Certainly, companion plants can be part of a plant guild. Although usually there's a large plant to kind of anchor the whole thing and to be grown around.
Yeah.
So there's the large plant, which is usually the fruit tree, and then you grow your guild around the fruit tree.
Um, you um, the nitrogen fixing plants or sorry, I need to talk louder. Uh, nitrogen fixing plants. How do they? Which one do you think are most of the time most useful? Which one are your favorites?
Um, let's see. Well, um, I mean, a nitrogen fixing plant is basically a plant that partners with soil bacteria to pull nitrogen from the air and convert it into forms that plants can use.
Yeah,
They act like living fertilizer factories.
yeah.
Uh,
Which one do you personally like the most of them?
well, it depends.
Oh, okay. If I
I
can,
mean, some of the ones that are best for a veganic food forest are things like beans and peas, lentils, clover, alfalfa. Um, Alfalfa is not eaten so much, but beans, peas, and lentils would be three that would be certainly be eaten by vegans.
yeah. Um,
I mean, the nice thing
mhm,
about adding a nitrogen fixing plant is that you reduce the need for external inputs and help build long-term soil fertility. So they
mhm.
kind of create a self-sustaining ecosystem.
Yeah, I use in my garden kind of tree plants that I always use together are pumpkins, some kind of bean that grow higher. So like a stick type of bean. Not sure what the word is
Okay.
for. And then pumpkins.
Green
And
bean, maybe?
yeah, some
And
kind.
pumpkins.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
pumpkins,
Pumpkins.
beans, and then corn. That's what I often try.
Oh, and corn.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then the beans grow on the corn. I think it looks really cool at the end of the season.
Um, yeah, the combination you described, pumpkin, corn, and beans, is something called the Three Sisters
Yeah.
Guild. So it's particularly popular in indigenous agriculture and many other Native American traditions. So corn gives you the tallness, beans give the vertical, and pumpkins give the vines on the ground. So it creates a really nice a trio that is classic, and I definitely agree with that.
Mm, ecology. How can food forest help uh family return to their original ecological footprint, reduce their ecological footprint, increase risk during uncertain times.
Okay, so I think you're asking how can food forests help families reduce their ecological footprints and increase
Yeah,
resilience during uncertain
yeah.
times?
Sorry, I'm
Okay,
not talking loud
um,
enough.
it's all right. I understood you. So growing your own food helps reduce transportation emissions, as well as packaging waste and dependence on fragile supply chains. If something happens, if we have another, planetary lockdown like we had 5 years ago, then you will still have food. It will be growing in your backyard. This helps provide food security during economic or environmental disruptions. A mature food forest can supply a significant portion of a family's produce needs. You can also, if you get too much of a particular type of produce, you can trade for something else. So if there's something else that you'd like to eat, but you're not getting, but you have a lot of apples, for example, you can trade with somebody who has a big walnut orchard, for example. So, the nice thing is you're basically starting to become food sufficient in and of yourself.
Mhm. Yeah, with the produce that I have to much often in the summer, I often try to dry as so, or I try to
Yes.
sell it.
Yes. Well, having a dehydrator is a really great idea because you can, take food like apples, for example, slice them up, and then dehydrate them, and they'll last for the entire winter. Especially with refrigeration, if you can do that. But often dehydrated food doesn't even require refrigeration. It's very stable.
Mhm. Also, refrigerators can make stuff more wet, and then it can spoil.
Oh, that's true. Yes, yes, these are damp.
Mhm. That's what I have. Not some stuff I don't even put dehydrate before the dehydrating process in the fridge because of this. Like I often don't put mushrooms in there, and I don't often put tomatoes don't belong there, in my opinions, and a lot of other stuff also. Carrots also don't really go well in the fridge, I think.
But yeah, I do refrigerate them, but they don't need it
Yeah.
usually.
Um, what are the easiest and most forgiving plants for beginners to start with?
Oh, the, the easiest plants. Well, I'd have to say something like mint. Mint just grows really wonderfully and in a very rewarding way. Um, Also, oregano and rosemary. Rosemary grows in hot climates and doesn't need a lot of water. They're excellent herbs. I also grow basil, but primarily I grow it in pots. I find it's more successful grown that way, and I love basil. It's just one of pestos are definitely a vegan staple. Um, but you can also try berries. There's raspberries that can be grown, including raspberries that don't have spines. So if you're concerned about being able to harvest raspberries if they have a lot of spines, you can get both raspberries and blackberries that don't have spines. Um, and blueberries are also rewarding, although I haven't had a lot of success with blueberries because my dogs tend to run them over and they die. So I found that blackberries and raspberries were more resilient. In terms of trees, I like figs and mulberries. Mulberry trees are just, I think, very under utilized. We have a Pakistani mulberry that gives the most delicious fruit. It's kind of like a tree that grows a bunch of blackberries, and mulberries are just delicious. Of course, we talked about fig trees already and how natural as a human food figs are. So, really encourage people to plant fig trees. But those sorts of trees help build confidence, in your gardening abilities and your ability to keep plants alive. So as long as you're watering them sufficiently, I think figs do require a substantial amount of water at least to get initiated. So don't skimp on the water. But in terms of just getting started, I think those are good choices.
Yeah, so where I live, my garden is personally on clay grounds, so I
Okay.
don't have trouble with having them enough water.
Right, right. Okay, it retains water well. Well,
Yeah,
that's good. That's good.
sometimes too
That's
much.
important to know what you're dealing with. Right, right. Really. Okay.
Some summers I don't and basically need and don't need to give them water because it is so much water.
Well, that brings up an important point in that not everyone is blessed with the perfect soil. So you do when you're starting a food forest, it does make sense to amend your soil and to fix your soil so that it's amenable to growing the sort of plants that you're interested in. So that is an important foundation element of food forests. When you're putting in a food forest, you can actually get a delivery of soil. Now we're working with veganic food forests, so we're building soil by composting. We can take leaves and grass and scraps from our garden and turn all that into very, very nutritious soil. So I highly recommend that if it's not okay, if you can't start a food forest right this minute, start the composting. Start building a compost pile or a compost bin, and that is a wonderful way to get a bunch of really nutritious, you know, black soil to be able to grow your food forest in.
hmm
I should
I
also mention that in our garden we have a pond, and the pond is mainly a home for our rescued goldfish. But the tree leaves as they get blown into the pond create basically a really nutritious compost at the bottom of it, along with the feces from the fish. And so we just every year or so we just dredge the pond, take out the overgrown the excess leaves, and then we use those to mulch our trees with. So that's been it does involve a little bit of animal input, but it's all voluntary in the sense that the goldfish are living happily in the pond. They're what they are known as feeder fish. They're goldfish that are sold by local stores in order to feed other animals, and so their lifespan is intended to be very short, and it's not usually a vegan alternative. So what we do is we go to those stores and buy these feeder fish, and they're very, very small, usually about an inch long, and then they very happily grow in the pond. And we've had them grow up to about 10 inches long, so they like it very much in the pond.
okay. I tend to use a lot of my so I have in my garden in my current garden I have around 2 composting pans in my new one, so that gotten bigger uh, part of
Okay.
land. Next year, I have three. I will put three post composting pans. So and all. One is on one side of the garden, and one in the middle, and the one on the end. And I fill them first one, and then next year the other, and then so on. So I have composts that can be put on the garden every 2 years. That's the idea of
Beautiful.
it.
Well, that's it's a long term thing. Composting is not just a short term thing; it's a
Yeah,
long term thing. So start. It's a great, as I mentioned before, it's a great way to start right now doing something that's going to ultimately feed your food forest. So start a compost bin. Take all the food scraps, the plant based food scraps that you were throwing away, and start putting those into a bin, and that's the start of your compost. I remember when I lived in England, watching primetime television show. The English people are very, very keen gardeners. And so primetime television show at the time was gardening. Now, this is very different to what primetime television in the United States is. But it was fascinating to me, watching the various programs on composting and how that was such an important part of gardening. So I did want to mention that, especially as we're going for a veganic approach here. Start composting your own organic food, your food waste, organic food
yeah.
waste.
So I also wanted to ask a controversial question. Some people find it really controversial.
Oh,
Um, s- um, what is your view on using human excrement as in the composting pan?
okay. Well, I think that the key is to do it in such a way that it doesn't offend anyone's nose. Usually, traditionally, if you think about humans or hominids running through the forest, one of the things that they typically do is they will cover their feces, much like cats do. So I recommend, if you're going to use human feces, to make sure that it is put under a layer of soil so that it is not offending any of your neighbors' noses. Because the smell of feces, some people find offensive, and so especially if you're not 100% vegan, vegan feces tends to be a much more pleasant smelling. Um, but it is certainly a great nutrition. I mean, part of the things that we do as living beings is create compost for plants. How cool is that?
Mm-hmm.
We live off plants and we create food for plants, and then they live off us. So if we're not using our own feces, we are letting a lot of useful carbon and plant food exit our ecosystem, and be sent to waste production facilities, which then turn it into fertilizer, which then other farms use. So why are we giving away our own personal fertilizer? Especially if we're eating vegan organic, we've got wonderful food for our plants. Now, feces are not to be used immediately on a plant. They do need to go through a composting process. Make sure that they're like as is normal and natural. Dig a little hole, put them in there, and cover them up, and let them mature, and let the worms go through them, and the bugs go through them, and then finally, um, uh, they can be used on your plants. There's you already have if there's any I would say gut flora in your feces, they're already in your body, so it's not going to hurt that those then are used to
Yeah,
feed a plant, like a fruit tree, for example. You already have those in your system. So the digestive difficulties
yeah,
come when you take on somebody else's,
yeah, and that is
you
also
know,
something
uh,
else that's a lot of people forget. They think it is gross to use human feces, but they are used the feces of cows and chickens,
oh,
and they're totally different
absolutely,
species. And
absolutely.
then we get salmonella, and then people are surprised where the salmonella comes from, and then they blame the spinach.
Well, in California, there was something very tragic that occurred, and that is that it was ruled that all almonds, and California is one of the largest almond producing locations in the entire world, that all almonds in California had to be pasteurized. And for the raw vegans, this was horrific because we're all of a sudden a key, an important part of our protein diet was taken away. So the reason for that was not because almonds, which are formed inside of a completely sealed nut, were in any way actually naturally dangerous or required any kind of pasteurization, but because animal inputs were being used on almond trees that then might possibly come into contact with the nuts. So again, it was very frustrating for the raw vegans in California at the time and elsewhere who relied on California almonds that all no longer were almonds going to be raw that were made from California. So we instead bought almonds from Italy. We imported from Italy to be able to continue to have almonds in our cuisine. But it was definitely a very controversial thing.
Yeah, that sounds really sad. So that the blame,
It was.
the blamed again the plants and not the way they're fertilized with animal feces that are not even cleaned.
If they just stopped fertilizing with animal feces, from yes, then it wouldn't have been a problem. But that was
Yeah,
that was something that happened.
yeah. If they're stopped
So
fertilizing with animal feces that are also then not cleaned even.
and even less I would say a less controversial way of fertilizing with the products of your own body is that of with urine. I mean, many people are used to when they're out in the forest, they'll pee on a tree. Well, goodness, that's something that you can consider. Now, from what I understand from people who have experienced are experienced with food forests, they tend to actually collect their urine and let it mature. Again, there's a maturing process just like there is for feces. And so collect it in a bucket, let it mature over a while, maybe put some herbs in it to make it smell a little bit better. And then, put a small amount on each plant. You don't want to overwhelm plants with it because it's strong fertilizer.
Yeah.
But adding a little bit here and there. And it's interesting because I notice that when I walk my dog and she goes out, she will find a plant to pee on. And it's like it's an instinct with her, and that she would be much more. She doesn't want to just pee or use her urine or her feces just anywhere. She finds a plant that would be benefited by those things. And I have a feeling that no one taught her to do that, that this is instinct. And maybe we should be doing the same thing, finding plants that we can fertilize with our waste products.
Do you think humans can smell that? Can smell also which plant needs fertilizer?
Oh, I don't think we have anywhere near the scenting capacity of a dog. A dog's nose is 200 times more powerful than ours. And the information that they're getting through smell is just vastly, vastly more detailed than what we experience. Even if our ability to smell was twice as strong as it currently is, that's not 200 times. That's not even 20 times. It's 200 times stronger. It's not even really possible, I think, for most humans to understand how a dog experiences their world through their ability to smell. It's very,
Hmm.
very strong. I mean, they can be blind and deaf and still be able to navigate their world and know who's in the room and everything just by their sense of smell.
Um, what advice will you give somebody who feels overwhelmed by the idea of starting a food forest?
Well, I would start small. Just start with one guild. One tree, one tree will start your guild. Maybe get a fig tree. That would be a great place to start if they grow
Yeah.
in your climate, and build a guild around your fig tree. Do a little bit of research. Maybe buy a book like mine that'll tell you how to get started, and water the guild, and see how it goes. See if it's something you like to do. See if you're feeling that it's rewarding. I mean, it does cost money to buy trees, so it's you may not want to invest several thousands of dollars or thousands of pounds or thousands of euros in a full food forest if you're not sure whether you would be okay taking care of a guild. So I'd start with a guild. Um, you know, uh, great plants to start with. We talked about figs. I also love my Pakistani mulberry. I think it's an amazing tree. I I really, really, really love my mulberry tree. You can also start with a nut tree, like walnut trees are beautiful if you have the space. They're big, but they're just a wonderful, wonderful nut. High in omega 3s, good nutrition, and you know, start small. Um, I mean, you don't need to transform your entire yard overnight. And I think that's the other important thing. If it's beyond your budget right now to um, to put in an entire food forest, start with start with one plant. Next year, another one. Plant another guild. Next year, plant another guild, and just keep it going until the entire yard is built. And I think that's the important thing: is start where you are. That's the key. If you can afford to, transform your entire backyard, great, do it. That would be a wonderful idea. If you can't, start small and start where you are. Remember that nature rewards patience and consistency. Be patient with your plants, be consistent in their care. Every small step that you take, whether it's planting a shrub, adding mulch, improving your soil, moves you closer to an abundant source of healthy, regenerative plant foods.
Okay. Finally, what is next for you? Any upcoming projects on workshops or books on the horizon?
Oh, well, thanks for asking. Yeah, I'm continuing to explore the intersection of plant-based nutrition, ecology, and regenerative living. I also provide food forest coaching sessions that are available online, where I offer personalized guidance to help you plan and work through any food forest challenges. I'm also offering educational workshops, seminars, talks, interviews like this one, to help people design their own food forests. And I'm considering writing future books that expand on food forest themes. My basic goal in doing this is to help people live in harmony with nature and their fellow creatures while nourishing themselves in the most ethical and sustainable way possible with raw veganic food grown in their own yards. You can learn more about me at my website, which is http://www.foodforestguide.com. And well, actually, I think it's actually thefoodforestguide.com. And you can buy my book at Amazon, which is linked on my website. So if you're interested, both Kindle and paperback forms. So it's been really fun chatting to you, and I'd love to talk to any of your listeners in greater detail about their food forest project.
That is nice. I hope you enjoyed today. And I hope the listeners enjoyed the podcast for today. Do you have any other questions for me? Also,
Oh, um, uh, not really. I mean, I'm kind of interested in your own food forest experience. I mean, how long you've been growing your food forest, and what some of the highlights of your experience has been.
okay. So I have been gardening, I think, for now around 13 years. I started off just basically knowing anything. And on the way, I started to learn more about different kind of plants philosophies, like permacultures and companion planting. And every year I started to learn more and more until I was having the idea, and the philosophies about gardening that I have right now. And that's one of the reasons I started this year. Um, actually, with the new garden, because I wanted to have a bigger plot for my idea for the garden. And I probably will show some pictures on my social media this year. How everything is going to turn out a bit. I have on one side I will have kind of let me draw a picture. Um, on one side we'll have all the fruit trees, and then persimmons and figs and cherry and pears and apple and then the figs. Then I have my pumpkin, beans, and corn section. So, and then I have one with a whole bar with kind of edible flowers, and then mince with eggplants because they can work quite well together. And then I have also a layer for other plants. And like I was saying, I basically use only compost. Like most of the stuff for my garden comes from me composting my excrements in the composting pan together with the parts from my food, and so like the leaves and the stems of the corn and other parts. Hope that makes sense a bit of what I'm trying to explain. I'm trying to give it in a smart possible way, so it don't drag out too much. Hope that was clear.
Yeah, thank you. Also, I wanted to mention one thing, and that is, how, talk a little bit about what people can expect in terms of the time and the maintenance that's involved.
Okay.
One of the things that a lot of people don't always realize is that food forest isn't necessarily an instant thing. It's something that grows over time. When it comes to herbs, greens, and some berries, you might see results in the first year, but most shrubs don't begin producing for
Yeah.
2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Whereas fruit trees can take 3 to 5 years to get into their
Yeah.
full production. So that's an important thing.
Yeah, persimmons here, for example, take around 6 years before they get the first persimmons.
Wow. So so you definitely need to be patient with the trees, but you can be seeing food from the berries, and certainly you can always be planting, things like Swiss chard, and greens that will be, providing you with food throughout the year.
Pears,
And
pears were quite a bit quicker. I got the first year that I planted the tree, I got some already a couple of pears. Not a lot,
great.
but I got some like 5 years. Five, I mean, the first year. Figs actually become every year more. Last year I think maybe I was having 2 kilograms or so. It seems like that he becomes more fruit bearing every year. Like I was saying, I think I did got something like 5 kilograms this year. And then also berries. So there's basically, you can also cut berries trees quite and multiply them quite easily by cutting.
Okay.
You cut.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, basically a lot of berry tree plants you can multiply by cutting, like blackberries, and also other ones that you can also, for example, goji berries. They also have the tendency to spread. So if you but sometimes you need to cut off part of the roots because they can grow in the garden of your neighbor if you don't isolate them, so the roots not can spread too much.
A bit invasive.
Yeah.
But with food, that's actually not a bad thing as long as it's in your own yard.
Yeah. So if you want to have them, you can better place them in the middle of your so they don't go to your neighbors if the neighbors don't like them. To be in your garden, or you talk with your neighbor, and if your neighbor also wants them, then there's no problem.
Right. Yeah. So and then I also wanted to mention a little bit about why a food forest is so good for you health wise. because, and if that's okay, because
Mhm.
when you grow food, you're naturally eating more fresh, whole plant foods. You can snack on berries when you're gardening. You harvest herbs for your tea. You build meals around what's ripe, and so it shifts your diet toward nutrient-dense, fiber-rich plant foods that support your long-term health. They produce the foods that are exactly the right ones that humans are physiologically adapted to eat. In my book, The Pliocene Diet, I talk about what it would be like to be a hominid a couple of million years ago, foraging for food in forests. And this is, important to think about. This is what we're meant to do. We're meant to eat fruits, leafy greens, tender vegetables, nuts, and herbs. That's what we're meant to eat. That's what our physiology is designed for us to eat. So when you have these foods growing right outside your back door, eating raw becomes effortless. It's the most natural alignment between your diet and the environment. And fresh produce contains higher levels of vitamins, antioxidants, enzymes, and phytonutrients that are good for you. Many nutrients degrade rapidly after harvest. So when you eat food or plant food minutes after picking it, you're getting the full nutritional potential that nature intended you to enjoy. So, these are great arguments for starting your food forest right today. Become more food sufficient, eat healthier food, and you know, start contributing to the reversal of climate issues.
Mhm. I agree with that. I also really like. I also personally, I really like to see the plants also grow.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's they're like children.
Yeah, you can say that. But yeah, any other thing you want to say before we end this stream?
No, I think that was it. Thank you so much for the interview, Vigani. It was a delight to talk to you again. And again, I just wanted to mention my website again, www.thefoodforestguide.com. And if anyone wants to get in touch with me, they're welcome to do that. My email address is info@thefoodforestguide.com if they'd like to send me a message.
Okay, then I speak you. I'm going to end the stream and then see you maybe with another podcast idea next week. Okay.
Great. Thank you. Thank